Amongst all the bad blood that we saw in the series between the Padres and the Dodgers, there is one fight that maybe was not on the big screen for a lot of people, and that is that the Padres banned Ken Rosenthal from their dugout during this series after some comments written by Ken Rosenthal throughout this series, and honestly, even prior to this series, where Ken Rosenthal has called out both Manny Machado and Fernando Tatis before. Now, of course, this all started with Game 2 in Dodger Stadium, where we all remember in, I believe it was the 7th inning, stuff being thrown on the field, players mocking the fans, fans mocking the players, things being thrown onto the field. It was mayhem. It was very, very bad for baseball, seeing what Dodgers fans did in that game. And Ken Rosenthal went on to write about this series, and this game specifically, about the players involved, them being Jurickson Profar, Manny Machado, and Fernando Tatis Jr. Now, this is specifically calling out Manny Machado in this game. Now, Machado and Rosenthal have had some issues in the past. This goes back to his days as a member of the Dodgers and even as the Orioles, for what Ken Rosenthal had to say about how Machado has always been maybe a little bit childish, maybe a little bit dirty in his way of playing the game, which I don't necessarily disagree with. That he had some instances in the past. There are times where he's been running to first base and kind of took out the guy's ankle on first base or what have you. I remember those days, and I wasn't a huge fan of it either, but Ken Rosenthal seems to be holding a grudge against this, and that came out here again in this article that he wrote about this series, where he said, Machado is far from the Padres' only irritant. Fernando Tatis Jr. is a smiling, dancing peacock, and Jurickson Profar is the kid who pulls the fire alarm at school and asks, who? Me? No, I don't want to act like the Padres were the underdogs in this game. I don't want to act like they were the team that nobody expected to win and all of a sudden they're against all odds making their way to the postseason. But I think that this is only fuel for the fire for these guys. And as you guys saw, at the end of one of those games, Fernando Tatis posted a picture of himself on Instagram from the game, and he just put a peacock and then a dancing emoji in the bottom right-hand corner, obviously taking a stab at Ken Rosenthal. The Padres Twitter account also said after winning a game during this series, they said, who? Us? Obviously in reference to the who me part of what Ken Rosenthal had to say. If you had noticed, in Game 3, Ken Rosenthal only went and interviewed the Dodgers dugout, and that's because the Padres said, no, that's okay. You're not coming over here to interview us in this game because all you have is slanderous things to say. I'm not going to take sides here and say who's wrong or who's right, but what I am going to say is that Ken Rosenthal has made some really, really stupid mistakes over the past few years, especially in regards to players on the Padres. There was an article written about the Wander Franco situation, obviously a very serious situation for MLB. Wander Franco deserves to be behind bars, and rightfully so he is, but in this article, unprovoked it seemed, that Ken Rosenthal talked about how this is a problem with guys that sign big extensions when they're still so young, and then they don't pan out, saying Wander Franco signed this big extension, he didn't work out. In this article, Ken Rosenthal was talking about how sometimes signing guys to long extensions when they're so young doesn't work out. And he goes on to mention how Wander Franco had signed an 11-year, $182 million contract through the end of the 2032 season with a club option for the 2033 season, and it could be worth up to $223 million for Wander Franco. Now, Wander Franco had only been in the major leagues for about 70 major league games when he had signed this extension at the age of 20 years old. He then, of course, went on to get arrested and make some really, really bad decisions. But later on in this article, Ken Rosenthal goes on to say Franco was not the first young player to experience such issues, which were relatively minor compared to what was to come. Nor was he the first in recent years to take a step backwards after signing a big contract. Consider the Padres' Fernando Tatis Jr., who signed a 14-year, $340 million contract in February of 2021, just after turning 22 years old. So in this article, Ken Rosenthal is comparing Fernando Tatis Jr. and what happened to him, his multiple motorcycle accidents, then getting popped for PEDs, to what Wander Franco did, which obviously is inexcusable, and I don't want to go too far into it, but what Wander Franco did is 10 times, 100 times, a million times worse than what Fernando Tatis Jr. did. And yeah, Fernando Tatis Jr. shouldn't have probably been doing what he was doing with his motorcycle, right? And then he was popped for PEDs, but you look at the guy and clearly he is still one of the best players in the game, PEDs or not. It's pretty clear that Fernando Tatis Jr. is a superstar. So for Ken Rosenthal, it seems like he's singling out guys specifically on the Padres. And I'm sure he's not. He's had plenty of other articles where I'm sure he's singled out a lot of people before. But this one stands out above the rest because of what's happening in the playoffs right now. Ken Rosenthal banned from the San Diego Padres dugout, and rightfully so. I don't blame the guys for not wanting to talk to him. Again, he has had plenty of talk about Manny Machado in the past, about his ability to not hustle. He didn't want to hustle. The whole Charlie Hustle comments back in the day, if you guys remember those articles, where they basically interviewed Manny Machado, and Machado said, yeah, I'm not the Johnny Hustle guy. I'm not going to be sprinting to first base every single time. And Rosenthal took offense to that. Rosenthal didn't like the fact that Manny Machado is not going to hustle all the time. He is then once again talking about Machado throwing the ball over towards the dugout of the Los Angeles Dodgers. And I'm not going to say that was right, because that wasn't right either. But Ken Rosenthal specifically got himself banned from talking to players in the dugout because of some stupid article that he wrote where he legitimately called out the 3 best players in the Padres lineup. 3 guys that were getting literal things thrown at them during game 2 of the Dodgers and Padres series. I don't know what Ken Rosenthal was thinking when he wrote this article. He has had plenty of other times where he has definitely rubbed fans the wrong way and rubbed players the wrong way. I think back as a Mariners fan myself to an article that he wrote about Scott Service getting fired before anybody else knew about it. He's the one that broke the news. And there was also a time during I believe the All-Star game in Seattle where he just stayed on the field even though everyone was ready to play the game. He was sitting there just talking to the camera on the field when he should have been walking off the field. Ken Rosenthal is a guy who I've respected for a long time, and maybe he's gotten a little too big for his 5'5" britches. But Ken Rosenthal made a huge mistake here with the San Diego Padres. I hope that everything can be corrected. I'd be interested to see how things play out over the offseason between these two sides. Let's say the Padres make some big moves here over the next few months. Maybe Kenny goes on to make an apology article. I highly doubt it. Or maybe this just continues and there's always this weird inflection point between the San Diego Padres and one of the top reporters in the game of baseball. We'll just have to wait and see. But I appreciate you guys watching this one, and I'll see you soon.